Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. In this video, we'll delve into every aspect of the squat technique, covering everything from grip, bar positioning, stance, breathing, depth, and many more. However, simply knowing all these won't be enough to optimize your results. You see, the key to optimizing your squat is in what I believe to be the difference between squatting like a pro and squatting like a beginner. And this has nothing to do with how much weight you lift, because you could be squatting heavy and still limit your potential by focusing on the wrong things, as beginners often do. So what do pros do differently, and how can you do it too from day one? On the one hand, beginners learn how to squat simply by following a list of instructions without understanding the reasoning behind them. So essentially, they try to copy a certain way of squatting that may not work for them, and if something doesn't feel right, they are unable to adjust their form based on their needs. After all, how can you adjust something if you don't understand why you were doing it in the first place? In contrast to this practice, pros develop their own technique based on two criteria that I'm going to share with you later in this video. These criteria determine every detail of the squat technique, and knowing them is the only way to understand how your form should be and how to adjust it based on your needs. So in this video, we're going to see how to squat like a pro, from breaking down these two criteria to every little detail on that basis. On top of that, I've managed to get some incredibly rare advice from a giant in the field of strength training that will completely transform how you squat. Eleiko. This video is not sponsored by Eleiko in any way. However, given their long-standing reputation in strength training equipment and education, I really hope that they would accept my proposal to interview one of their experts and get valuable insights for this video. Fortunately, they did. So I traveled all the way to their headquarters in Halmstad, Sweden, to meet with Oskar Björk, Eleiko's representative for this interview. Oskar works at Eleiko as a product manager, but he is also a powerlifting coach for the Swedish national team. So I would say that he is both an expert in strength training and strength training equipment. I'm very excited to share with you his advice on squat technique, although, spoiler alert, our discussion also covered deadlifting and bench pressing, which you'll see in upcoming videos. So let's start with the two criteria that all your technique should be based. The first criterion is to achieve the optimal mechanics based on your purpose, and this is fundamental for all movements. Essentially, it has to do with what type of movement you want to do based on your goals. So for example, if you want to do a half squat, achieving these mechanics would be your first criterion. Or in another case, if you wanted to do a front squat, achieving these mechanics would be your first criterion. It may sound obvious, but trust me, it is very important to think of this parameter as one of the two criteria that determine your entire technique, because a lot of things change based on that. Now, in this video, we'll be discussing the back squat in the context of general strength training, targeting the quadriceps, glutes, and erector spinae muscles. So for the purpose of this video, achieving these mechanics is our first criterion. And just a quick note for those concerned about the potential harm of performing a full range back squat with knees pushed forward. Don't worry, the evidence that we have today suggests not only that it's safe, but in some cases it is even less stressful than the half squat. I won't get into the specifics here, but let me know in the comments if you'd like me to do a video dedicated on the science of that topic. Now let's see the second criterion, which is creating and maintaining tension under the bar. Now this is absolutely essential specifically for the back squat, and Oskar highlighted its importance right from the start of our talk when I asked him what is the most important technique cue for the back squat.
For the back squat, the most important technique cue probably is maintaining pressure, intra-abdominal pressure, the bracing as we like to call it, in combination with having and maintaining a neutral spine. The center of gravity is very high up in the squat. The higher the weight on the bar, the more extreme it is in relation to your own body weight. Balance plays a big role here. You absolutely need to stabilize everything that's under the bar. That's the most important thing.
Stabilizing everything under the bar is crucial not only for safety reasons, but also to increase the effectiveness of the squat. This is our second criterion, and together with the first one, they determine every single technique instruction that we're about to see. But how exactly does this work? How these two criteria tell you what to do in practice? Let's see a quick example of how this works when choosing the ideal stance for your body type. So how wide or narrow should your stance be based on these two criteria? Your stance should be wide enough to allow you to hit the required depth, which is part of the mechanics of the back squat. This covers the first criterion. However, it shouldn't be too wide to lead you to a hard to control position that will mess up your stability. This has to do with the second criterion. So if your stance allows you to hit the desired mechanics without losing tension, you have the perfect stance. And this is how these two criteria determine your technique. Now let's see all the instructions, starting from positioning. Start by positioning yourself facing the rack, not the other way around. This is because when you're tired at the end of a set, it's easier to walk forward directly into a clear view of the J-cups and rack the barbell. Walking backwards and searching for the J-cups is completely unnecessary and, in my experience, increases the risk of misplacing the barbell on the rack. Once you position the barbell evenly on the rack at about the height of your armpit, you should grip the bar with a relatively close grip. In general, the closer the grip is to your body, the easier it is to create pressure on your upper back, which is the base of the bar. Ideally, your arms should squeeze in while your scapulae are slightly elevated, creating a solid base for the barbell. People with flexible shoulders do that very well with a narrow grip, while less flexible ones find it easier to create pressure with a wider grip. In general, you should experiment with what works best for you, starting with a close grip. Your criterion here is what will help you more in creating and maintaining tension. On the bar positioning, you have the option to choose between a high bar or a low bar position, depending on the mechanics that you want to achieve. In other words, your first criterion. If you want to squat for general strength, focusing on the quadriceps, you should go with a high bar position that will force you into a more upright bottom position. This is the most common bar positioning on the squat. Alternatively, if you want to shift the focus on the glutes and erector spinae muscles, you should go with a low bar squat that will force you into a more bent position at the bottom of the squat. On a high bar squat, you place the bar over your traps, which is right over the scapular bones. An easy way to find this spot is to slide your back on the bar until you feel the moment that the bar hops over the edge of your scapula. On the other hand, on a low bar position, the bar goes lower on the back over the scapulae. In this case, the barbell is also stabilized by a more bent position of the torso and the elbows higher up. Choose the version that best suits your needs, and if you're not sure yet, go with a high bar position that is the most common one. For the rest of this guide, I'll be squatting with a high bar position. Regarding the position of the elbows, I kinda disagree with the coaches that propose that the elbows should be right below the barbell, although I understand that it may work for many. In general, I think that a more upward position reinforces the effort of creating tension on the surface below the bar. In addition, the lower the elbows get, the more the traps are spread in a way that they leave less musculature below the barbell. When you bring the elbows up, it's almost like there's a natural step created and it feels like a much stronger position. This upward position of the elbows is also very common among Olympic weightlifters like Luke Shajun, Carlos Nazar, Lasha, and many more. However, still others use a position closer to the body. In any case, the criterion here is again to choose the version that will help you more in creating and maintaining tension under the bar. If I were you, I would start with the elbows lifted and make sure to experiment with what works best for my body type. Now, once you position your body under the bar, it's time to unrack. Do that simply by squatting with a neutral back. I advise against unracking the barbell with one leg forward or swinging, since both of these might compromise your stability, especially as you're starting out. During the walkout, take 3 slow steps back, 2 big ones and then a short one. Regarding your stance, we saw earlier how wide or narrow it should be based on the 2 criteria. But let's see now why Oscar believes that your stance is the second most important cue for the back squat.
Second most important cue for the back squat is probably to have a stance that allows you to hit the required depth without entering like a real end range of motion. When you're in the bottom position, you should control the bar. You should not just rely on the bounce from the stretch reflex and lose control of everything. And this kind of goes together with keeping the stability, but also make sure that you control the whole range of motion.
So your stance is tightly connected with the depth that you want to hit on the back squat. The deeper you want to go, the wider your stance should be. The question is, how deep should you go based on your goals? As a powerlifting coach, Oscar advised against entering an end range position. This is absolutely essential for people who want to maximize the weight they lift. However, for others who train for overall wellness and health, training through their full range of motion makes more sense, even if this means that they will lift less weight. This again has to do with the first criterion, the mechanics you want to achieve based on your goals. So again, choose the width of your stance and the depth of your squat based on the two criteria. Moving on to your toes, they should be slightly turned outwards at a level that will allow you to hit the required depth, but not too wide to lose stability and tension. This can vary from a turning of a few degrees to all the way to 45 degrees depending on the anatomy of your hips. Based on these two criteria, experiment within that range to find what suits you best. Regarding the position of your chest, most people mistakenly try to keep it facing forward. In reality, the position of your chest is determined by the position of your spine, which must be neutral. The term neutral spine refers to a relatively straight position of the back. This is one of the technique instructions that is the same for everyone, and it has to do with the second criterion, maintaining tension. As you go down, your torso naturally bends forward and your chest automatically turns downwards. Don't force your chest to face forward, as this will create an excessive lumbar lordosis, breaking the neutral position of the spine. Now, before you start the squat, you need to make sure that you have a tight midsection. You do that with bracing, which again is absolutely essential for everyone. Bracing refers to a breathing technique that aims to increase intra-abdominal pressure and stabilize your core. To do that, you take a deep breath through your diaphragm that creates a body of air in your midsection. Then, by contracting your abdominals, you push this body of air in all directions, creating pressure that stabilizes everything around it. So, to put it simply, breathe through your diaphragm, contract your abdominals, and hold this for the lift. Many people struggle with learning how to brace, as it can get confusing in the beginning. If you struggle with this too, the next advice Oscar shared with us will be a game changer.
But I think the underrated thing is to actually learn to utilize the belt properly. So many people assume that a lifting belt is just some kind of passive support that you put on and then you can lift more weight because of it. I think, in fact, a lifting belt is a very good learning tool to actually learn to create pressure by pushing your abs out into the belt. Even on light weights, when you're starting out, by practicing with a belt, you will become better at creating this pressure and bracing. And that will teach you to be better without a belt then.
Honestly, I had never considered the lifting belt as a learning tool for bracing, and I was completely surprised by how much sense that made. It's easier to learn bracing with a lifting belt because you get feedback of how effectively you're pushing your abdominal wall against it. To do this in practice, simply take a deep breath and focus on evenly pushing the belt forward and to the sides. The pressure of the belt against your body provides feedback on your technique. Once you've distributed the pressure evenly across the belt, hold your breath and squat. As you stand up, exhale and brace again for the next repetition. Although it's definitely possible to learn how to brace without a lifting belt, after my interview with Oscar, I realized that using one can significantly ease the learning process, and that's why I highly recommend it, especially for beginners. Now, if you already know how to brace, I wouldn't say that you need a belt during your regular training if you're training for overall wellness at relatively low intensities. However, for those aiming to improve their maximal strength, I would definitely recommend utilizing the belt to optimize bracing and tension. Now, bracing kinda sets the pace of how your breathing should be on the squat. Since you have to hold the air during the squat, it makes sense to inhale before the descent, hold your breath as you squat, and exhale only when you get back up. Then brace again and do the next rep. Now, as with most dynamic movements, squat has 4 phases: descent, bottom position, lift, and top position. The time you spend in each of these phases is known as the tempo of the exercise and is presented with 4 numbers that represent the seconds you take in lowering, bottom, lifting, and top phases. So if you spend 1 second going down, 0 seconds on the bottom, 1 second going up, and 1 second on the top position to exhale and brace again, this is a 1-0-1-1 tempo. In other cases, based on your purpose, you might choose to pause on the bottom position like the famous clock-off squat. In this case, the tempo would be 1, 3, 1, and 1. Now, no matter the tempo you choose to train with, controlling your negative is essential for everyone. Dropping down too fast will compromise the stability of even experienced lifters. In addition, when thinking about the speed of your movement, consider also the time that it takes to do everything right from start to finish. Oscar shared with us that, in his opinion, this is the most underrated factor of the squat.
An underrated factor also is taking your time. Starting from the walkout out of the rack, you should be under the bar completely, where you need to be. Get the bar straight up from there, so you don't take it out of the rack in a stride, but up first, then you take 2 or 3 steps out. You pause again, new big breath, set your bracing, everything, you do the rep, and then you reset again. So take a lot of time to really get everything right. Don't rush it to do several reps. There's no hurry. It's really underrated to take your time and do it properly.
What I loved about Oscar's answers in general was that he didn't focus on small technical details, but rather in what I believe to be the big picture. Fundamental factors that affect the entire execution of the squat. Taking your time to do everything right is, in my opinion, one of these fundamental factors that can make a difference in every aspect of your squat form. Now, moving forward to the descent, you should start by breaking legs and hips at the same time. As you go down, maintain tension in your entire body and keep your knees in line with your feet. At the bottom position, make sure that your knees are in line with your feet and that you hit the required depth based on your goals. If you're not aiming for a pose at the bottom position and you're training for overall strength and wellness, it makes sense to do a full range squat with a small bounce, but not too much of it since it will ruin your stability. On the other hand, for those who want to maximize the weight of their lifts, a shorter range that barely breaks parallel is likely more suitable. During the lift, you want to push with your feet flat on the floor and your knees in line with them. In addition, one excellent advice I got for the lifting part of the squat is to lift the elbows even more. So lift the elbows as you go up. I don't know why, but it really helps. The funny thing about this technique Q is that once I got it under my radar, I started noticing it in Olympic weightlifters. You can play with it and see if it works for you. Once you finish, walk towards the rack until both sides of the barbell contact the J-cups, and then simply squat down to rack the barbell. These are all the technique instructions that you'll need for the back squat, but one thing that you should know is that they are not created equal. I realized that when I asked Oscar what is, in his opinion, the most overrated factor of the squat. See what he had to say.
Most overrated component of the squat, I'm not going to really answer your question here, but I would say that there is no one stance or hand position or bar position that is the optimal one. It's going to look a lot different depending on who you are, how you're built. So you're going to solve the problem of a squat in different ways. So it's kind of overrated in that sense to talk about your feet need to be pointing exactly in this direction and you should have the bar there and there. These are all variables. They don't really matter. They're individual things. You'll find what works best for you is not what works best for me because we're built differently. Just work together with your anatomy, your mobility, your strengths, and keep the most important things in focus, like the bracing and the neutral spine, and take it from there.
Yeah. So you would say that the most important things and kind of universal for everyone is the bracing and keeping a neutral spine.
Yes.
And from then, the positioning on the feet and other components like the knees, the depth, all these have a range.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's going to look different if you take a person with really long femurs, like a good deadlifter, they are going to have to fold forward a lot more to reach the sufficient depth compared to a person who is built like a weightlifter, really good squatter with short femurs who can stay very upright and just do it like that. Obviously it's going to be different and just play with it. It's like that. Do the best of the situation.
Yeah, just play with it, test it and figure out what works best for you.
Right.
So some of these technique instructions are strict and apply to everyone, while others vary based on individual characteristics. The ones that apply to everyone, no matter the goals, body type or training level, are the bracing, the breathing pattern, maintaining tension, keeping a neutral spine, controlling the negative, keeping flat feet on the floor and keeping the knees in line with the feet. The rest of the instructions vary based on your individual characteristics and are things that you need to experiment with based on the two criteria of the squat. Finally, I'd like to close the video with Oscar's advice for people who are just starting out with their squats.
The first things I would recommend to someone who's just starting out with a squat is to get the movement pattern right. Really practice bracing, positioning, controlling the movement before pushing weight. It's so common to start chasing weight and you start to sacrifice the form during the lifts for very small arbitrary increases. Like, you will increase in weight over time, absolutely. Just do it properly. Don't chase the numbers too hard in the beginning. Build a solid foundation so you can actually have a good technique first.
I couldn't agree more with Oscar's last point. Nothing will give you more results than taking the time to build the foundation of your squat. I really want to thank him for taking time out of his busy schedule for this interview, and of course the entire Eleiko team for their amazing hospitality at their headquarters. During my visit there, I honestly felt I was in an environment where people set the bar high and work with passion. This resonated with me and confirmed all the reasons that I wanted to include them in this video. I'm making 2 more videos with them on bench pressing and deadlifting, so make sure to keep an eye out for them. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you all next time.